You actually spent all day making this. My sister-in-law stood at the edge of my kitchen, her eyes sweeping across every pot, every carefully arranged dish, every detail I had worked on since sunrise. She let out a short laugh, the kind that wasn't really a laugh at all. That's so sad. I turned from the stove and looked at her. She was already walking away, pulling out her phone like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just said that to me in my own home. I stood there holding a wooden spoon, steam rising around me, and I told myself what I always told myself in these moments. Let it go. She's just like that. She doesn't mean it. My husband would say the same thing if I brought it up later. She's always been blunt. You know how she is. Just let it go. So I let it go. Again. My name is Catherine. I'm 38 years old. I've been married to my husband for 9 years, and for most of those 9 years I have been letting things go when it comes to his sister. I should probably be better at it by now. I'm not. My husband and I met when we were both working at the same accounting firm in Charlotte. He was sharp, steady, the kind of man who thought things through before he spoke. I fell in love with how calm he was, how sure. We got married after 2 years of dating, bought a house in the suburbs, and had 2 kids, a daughter who just turned 7 and a son who's 5. When our daughter was born, we made the decision together that I would stay home. It wasn't just my idea. He wanted it. He said he grew up with both parents working constantly and that he barely saw them. He wanted something different for our kids. I wanted it too, so I became a full-time mother and homemaker, and for the most part, I was proud of that. The one person who never let me be proud of it was his sister. My sister-in-law is 3 years older than my husband. She works in finance in Atlanta, makes good money, travels for work, and has never been married. There is nothing wrong with any of that. What is wrong is the way she has always looked at me like I'm a project that was abandoned halfway through. Like choosing to raise my children and keep our home was the most tragic thing she had ever witnessed up close. It started small. Comments about how I could have kept working part-time. Suggestions about daycares, about career gaps, about how hard it would be to re-enter the workforce. She said these things at holiday dinners, at birthday parties, in passing on the phone. She never yelled. She never made a scene. She just said things, quietly and precisely, the way you deliver bad news at a doctor's appointment. My husband heard some of it. When I brought it up privately, he would get this tired look on his face, not dismissive, but exhausted, and he'd say she meant well. She just had a different way of expressing things. She was protective of him. She worried. I should try not to take it personally. I tried not to take it personally for 9 years. The visit that changed everything happened in October. My sister-in-law came to stay for 5 days. She said she was in town for a conference, and it made more sense to stay with us than to book a hotel. My husband was glad she was coming. He missed her. I told myself it would be fine. I spent the week before her arrival deep cleaning the house. I reorganized the guest room, bought new towels, stocked the refrigerator with things I knew she liked. I did all of this not because I was trying to impress her, but because I genuinely wanted things to go well. I wanted peace. I wanted my husband to have a good visit with his sister without it turning into 3 days of me quietly swallowing something cruel. She arrived on a Tuesday evening. My husband picked her up from the airport and they came home laughing, carrying takeout bags because she said she wasn't sure what we had in the house. I had cooked dinner. I didn't say anything about that. I just put it in the refrigerator and ate the takeout and smiled and told myself the week was going fine. By Wednesday morning, it had already started. She came downstairs while I was making my son's breakfast and stood in the doorway of the kitchen in a silk robe, looking around the room slowly, and said, "You really do this every single morning?" I told her yes, I made breakfast every morning. She made a sound that was not quite a word and poured herself a coffee and took it back upstairs. My son looked up at me from his bowl of oatmeal. "Is Aunt grumpy?" he asked. I told him she was just tired from traveling. The comments accumulated the way they always did with her. She noticed that my daughter was reading below her grade level. She had seen a book on the counter and asked how old the intended reader was, and she said something about how it was important for children to have structured, educational environments, that homeschooling and informal learning could leave gaps. I reminded her, carefully, that my daughter was in school. She said, "Of course. I just mean the at-home reinforcement." She said it the way you say something when you want to be on record as having said it, not because you believe the other person will actually do anything about it. That evening, I overheard her in the living room on a phone call. I was coming down the hallway, and I slowed when I heard my name. She was telling someone I don't know who that her brother had married a woman who was, and I am quoting exactly because I stood still in that hallway and memorized every word, perfectly nice, but not exactly someone who challenges herself. She said she supposed it worked for him, that some men wanted that. She said it with so much careful reasonableness that I almost felt guilty for listening. I went back to the kitchen. I finished washing the dishes. I did not cry until the kids were in bed. My husband came to find me later. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water I hadn't touched. He asked if I was all right. I told him what I had heard. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said she probably didn't mean it the way it came out. I asked him what other way it could have come out. He said she was under a lot of pressure at work. He said she had a hard time expressing things. He said he would talk to her. He didn't talk to her. Or if he did, nothing changed. Thursday was the day I decided to cook the big dinner. It was partly stubbornness, I'll admit. I wanted her to sit at my table and eat something I had made, and not be able to say anything unkind about it, because it would be too good. I know how that sounds. I know it wasn't the healthiest motivation. But I had been trying to keep the peace for 3 days, and I needed to do one thing that felt like mine. I made her favorite meal. I knew what it was because she had mentioned it once, years ago, at Christmas, a slow-braised, short rib with roasted vegetables and a red wine reduction. I had never made it before. I spent most of Thursday researching the recipe, buying the exact right cut of meat from the butcher 2 towns over, simmering everything for hours. The house smelled incredible by mid-afternoon. My daughter came into the kitchen 3 times just to stand near the stove. My sister-in-law came home from her conference at around 4. She walked through the front door, set down her bag, and came directly to the kitchen without being invited. She stood in the doorway and surveyed everything: the pots, the cutting board, the carefully reduced sauce, and I watched her face go through something I couldn't entirely read. "Short ribs," she said. "Yes," I said. "Your favorite." She paused, and something moved across her expression that might have been discomfort. Then, it cleared. "You remembered that from what? Christmas a few years ago?" I did. She looked around the kitchen again. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," I said. She nodded and left the kitchen. I heard her in the hallway telling my husband something in a low voice. I couldn't hear what she said. I turned back to the stove. Dinner was at 7. My husband poured wine. My daughter told a long, winding story about something that had happened at school that week involving a disagreement over a pencil case. My son refused to eat his vegetables and then ate all of them when he thought no one was watching. It was, for the first 30 minutes, almost entirely pleasant. My sister-in-law cut into her short rib. She tasted it. She chewed slowly. I watched her without watching her, the peripheral attention you develop when you have been in proximity to a critic for 9 years. She swallowed. She set down her fork. "It's a little heavy," she said. I looked at her. "The sauce," she said. "It's over-reduced. It's almost bitter." She took another bite and made a face that was a performance of politeness over distaste. "Did you follow a recipe?" "I did," I said. "Which one?" I told her. She made a small sound. "That recipe has always been inconsistent. I've tried it twice. The timing never works. You'd need to adjust based on the actual cut of meat, the size." She said it gently, helpfully, the way she always did, so that if I objected, I would be the one making it a conflict. "I appreciate the effort. I really do. I know you worked hard on it. I know you worked hard on it." She said it the way you say it to a child who has drawn you a picture that isn't quite recognizable. My husband was looking at his plate. I picked up my fork and continued eating. I told myself, let it go. 7 more words. Let it go. My daughter, who is 7 and does not yet understand that some things should be let go, looked across the table at her aunt and said, "I think it tastes really good." "Thank you, sweetheart," my sister-in-law said. "You'll understand more about flavors when you're older." Something tightened in my chest. My son said, "Mommy's food is always the best food." "That's very sweet," my sister-in-law said, and smiled at him the way adults smile at children who have said something charming and incorrect. I looked at my husband. He was still looking at his plate. We made it through the rest of dinner in a kind of suspended tension conversation about her conference, about her work, about colleagues of hers I had never met and would never meet. I cleared the plates. I brought out the dessert. I had also made a simple apple cake, nothing elaborate, and she took one bite and said she was watching her sugar intake and left most of it on her plate. After the kids were in bed, I washed the dishes alone. My husband came in to help dry, and we worked in silence for a few minutes, and then he said, "She's leaving Saturday." "I know," I said. "She really did appreciate dinner. She told me so." "She told me it was bitter," I said. He dried a plate and put it in the cabinet. "She's just particular about food. You know that." I turned off the faucet. I turned around and looked at him, and I said, "She told me. I'm not someone who challenges herself. She said that on a phone call Wednesday night. She said some men want that kind of woman. She was talking about me to someone else in our house while I was putting our children to bed." He went very still. "I didn't tell you right away because I didn't want to ruin the visit," I said. "I've been not wanting to ruin things for 9 years. I made her favorite meal today because I was hoping for one dinner where she didn't make me feel like a disappointment. And she told my 7-year-old daughter that she'd understand flavors better when she's older." My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "I'm not angry at you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what this feels like for me. Every time she visits." My husband set down the dish towel. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He stood there in the kitchen, in the light above the sink, and I watched something move through his expression that I hadn't seen before. Not the tired look. Not the exhausted brace of a man trying to hold two people together. Something else. Something that was clearing rather than closing. "Where is she?" he said. "Living room," I said. "I think." He walked out of the kitchen. I stood at the sink and listened. At first I heard nothing. Then I heard his voice, low and even, and then her voice, and then silence, and then her voice getting sharper. I dried my hands on the dish towel he had put down. I stayed where I was. After about 4 minutes, my sister-in-law appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her face was very controlled in the way faces get when the person is working hard to control them. She looked at me for a moment, and then she said, "I want you to know that it was never my intention to make you feel small. If that's what happened, I'm sorry. It was an apology the way a legal statement is an apology, technically fulfilling the form of the thing." "Thank you," I said. She nodded once and went upstairs. My husband came back into the kitchen. He stood next to me at the counter, and he didn't say anything for a moment, and I didn't either. Then he said, "She's going to go to a hotel tomorrow morning." I looked at him. "I told her she needed to leave," he said. "I told her that what she said about you on that phone call was unacceptable. I told her that the way she talked to you at dinner tonight was unacceptable. I told her that when she says things like that in front of our kids, she's teaching them how to treat you, and I will not have that in this house." I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't even realized was clenched. "She said I was overreacting," he said. "She said she was just being honest and that you were too sensitive. I told her that I had spent 9 years asking you to let things go, and that I had been wrong to do that, and that I wasn't going to ask you to do it anymore." He was quiet for a moment. I should have said something a long time ago. I kept thinking, if I just kept the peace, eventually things would smooth out on their own. That wasn't fair to you. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I could. He picked up the dish towel again and went back to drying. My sister-in-law came downstairs the next morning with her suitcase at 7:30. My husband was already up. I heard them talking in the entryway, not fighting, just talking, and then the front door opened and closed. My daughter came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast and asked where Aunt had gone. I told her she had an early morning. My daughter accepted that and sat down and asked if she could have the oatmeal with honey. I told her she could have whatever she wanted. My husband came in a few minutes later and sat at the table, and I put a plate in front of him, and he said thank you. And I said, "You're welcome." And we sat together while the kids ate and argued cheerfully about something that didn't matter. And outside the kitchen window, it was a gray October morning, the kind that usually makes me feel hemmed in. But it didn't that morning. My sister-in-law texted me 2 days later. It was a long message, longer than I expected, and it was different from the apology she had offered in the kitchen doorway. She said she had been doing a lot of thinking. She said she had a complicated relationship with the choices I had made because they were so different from her own, and she had confused different with lesser. She said she admired things about my life that she had never found the courage to say out loud because saying them would mean confronting things about her own life she wasn't ready to face. She said she knew that didn't excuse anything. She said she was going to try to do better. I read the message twice. I didn't respond right away. I put my phone down and went to fold laundry, and I thought about what it would mean to believe her, and what it would mean not to. I wrote back that evening. I told her I appreciated her saying that. I told her I wasn't ready to pretend nothing had happened, but that I was willing to start from where we were. I told her the short ribs were actually quite good. I had eaten the leftovers for lunch that day, and they were better on the second day, which is almost always true of a braise, and that maybe next time she visited, she could cook her version and show me what she meant about the timing. She wrote back, "I'd like that." It was the first exchange between us in 9 years that felt like something real. I can't tell you that everything changed after that week. Relationships don't work that way. They move slowly, they backslide, they require maintenance. My sister-in-law and I are not close. We are still learning how to be in the same room without the old patterns pulling at us. But something fundamental did shift, and it shifted because my husband finally said what needed to be said. Not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly and without apology. I think about what he said to me that night in the kitchen, that he had spent 9 years asking me to let things go, and that he had been wrong, that he should have said something sooner. There is something in me that wanted to be angry about the 9 years. Part of me was angry, but there is also something I have learned from watching my children that keeps getting in the way of that anger, which is this. People say the thing when they are finally ready to say it, and not before, and the work of being in a family is learning to stay long enough for people to get ready. I stayed. He got ready. My daughter can read anything she wants. That's enough for now. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.